December 1941. The American Southwest. The wind cuts through the red sands of Arizona, carrying whispers from the mesas. The world is at war, but here, on Navajo land, life moves to the rhythm of drums and the language of ancestors. A language no outsider truly understands. Miles away, radio operators in Pearl Harbor are still piecing together the chaos after Japan's devastating attack. America is desperate. Its codes are breaking, its messages intercepted, its secrets laid bare before the enemy. The military needs a system no one can read, no machine can decipher. Major General Clayton Vogel, head of the U.S. Marine Corps Communications, receives an unusual proposal from a man named Philip Johnston, a World War I veteran. Johnston is not Navajo, but he grew up among them. He speaks their language fluently. And he knows something no one else does. The Navajo tongue has no written form, no linguistic equivalent outside their culture. It's alive only in sound, fluid, sacred, and completely unrecorded. Vogel listens. Johnston explains that the Navajo language could be used to encode messages faster than any cipher machine. He pauses, then says, "The Japanese will never break it, because they'll never even recognize it." At first, the idea sounds insane. Using a tribal language to coordinate modern warfare? But desperation drives innovation. The war in the Pacific has shown that every minute counts, and a broken code means dead soldiers. So, in early 1942, Vogel authorizes a secret meeting at Camp Elliott, near San Diego. A handful of Navajo men are brought in, quiet, reserved, but proud. They are asked to demonstrate how their language could carry battlefield messages. They speak into a microphone, fluid syllables that roll like wind through canyon walls. On the other end of the line, the decoded message comes out perfectly clear. Send reinforcements to Hill 382. Japanese advancing from north. No codebook, no cipher wheels, just their voices. Vogel stands silent for a moment, then nods. This, he says, could change the war. February 1942. Camp Elliott, California. In a guarded corner of the Marine Corps base, a small barracks hums with an unfamiliar rhythm, Navajo voices repeating phrases over and over, turning sacred words into instruments of war. The first 29 recruits, later known simply as the original 29, have arrived. Most are young, barely out of school. Farmers, shepherds, sons of veterans. Some have never left their reservations before. But they share one thing, an unbreakable bond with their language. Their mission is top secret. Not even other Marines on base know why they are there. Each day they sit at wooden tables surrounded by typewriters, field radios, and chalkboards. Together with Marine communications officers, they begin the hardest task imaginable, turning a living language into a military code. They start by creating an alphabet of sounds. Each letter of the English alphabet is assigned to a Navajo word. For the letter A, the word is wulachi, meaning ant. For the letter B, shush, meaning bear. For the letter C, mosi, meaning cat. Word by word, they rebuild English through the Navajo tongue. Then comes the real challenge, translating complex military terminology. How do you say battleship, tank, or machine gun in a language that has never known industrial war? They invent metaphors. A submarine becomes beshlo, iron fish. A tank becomes chedagahi, tortoise. A bomber plane, jaysho, buzzard. Every word is tested for clarity, speed, and reliability. The code must be fast enough for combat. No hesitation, no confusion. Sergeant Major Frank Shin, who oversees training, writes in his report, "These men speak a language that moves like water, impossible to predict, impossible to duplicate. Even if you heard it, you'd never understand it twice the same way." Within weeks, the code talkers can encode and decode complex battle messages in under 20 seconds, something that takes machines several minutes. By spring, their vocabulary includes over 200 terms. It's not just a code anymore, It's a living system, flexible and poetic, built by warriors who turned their language into a weapon. They still don't know it, but soon, that weapon will decide the outcome of battles thousands of miles away, across the vast, deadly Pacific. June 1942. Pacific Ocean. A transport ship cuts through gray waters under a low sky. On board, among crates of rifles and rations, sit the first Navajo Code Talkers. Their faces calm, their uniforms new, their purpose unknown to most of the men around them. Destination: Guadalcanal. The war in the Pacific is brutal, chaotic, and soaked in uncertainty. Communications fail under fire, messages are intercepted, and every second of hesitation costs lives. The Marines need a system the Japanese can't break, and now they have one. As the landing craft approach the island, the Code Talkers clutch their radios, not rifles. The moment their boots hit the beach, they begin transmitting. Wolachi shush mosi. To an outsider, it sounds like song. Rhythmic, flowing, almost serene. But within seconds it becomes a message. Attack at dawn. Enemy position located. Coordinates incoming. Commanders can hardly believe the speed. No cipher machines, no codebooks. Just men, voices, and memory. Each message sent by Navajo radio operators is received, translated, and acted upon before the Japanese can even start decoding. By August, word spreads through the Pacific. The Navajo are unstoppable. Japanese cryptographers intercept their transmissions daily, and fail every time. They record hours of Navajo speech, hoping to analyze it later, but even the best linguists can't identify patterns. The language seems alive, shifting, refusing to be captured. In one report, Japanese intelligence officers described the messages as an impenetrable forest of sounds. Meanwhile, the Code Talkers continue their work under fire. Radios strapped to their backs, they move through jungle and mud, relaying orders in seconds that save entire battalions. Private Chester Nez later recalled, "Bullets were flying, explosions shaking the ground, but our voices stayed steady. We didn't think about dying. We thought about the message." By the end of 1942, their code proves flawless. Not a single Navajo transmission is ever broken. For the first time in the Pacific Campaign, the Marines have a communications edge, and it belongs to the voices of a people once silenced on their own land. November 1943. Bougainville, Solomon Islands. Thick jungle. Torrential rain. Static-filled airwaves. American units are scattered across the terrain, pinned down by enemy fire. Radios crackle with confusion, until one voice cuts through. Calm. Rhythmic. Commanding. Saynil, Ajai Tuishjai, Beshtu Tlishana. The Navajo words flow like drumbeat. Within moments, artillery units adjust their fire, and shells begin to fall exactly where they're needed. The Japanese never intercept a clear meaning, only sounds they can't comprehend. That voice belongs to Corporal Samuel Sandoval, one of the Code Talkers stationed deep behind the front line. His transmission saves an entire company from being surrounded. No encryption machine could have done it faster. No cipher could have survived the chaos of the battlefield like a human voice speaking an unbreakable tongue. Across the Pacific, from Tarawa to Peleliu, the pattern repeats. Code Talkers move with the Marines, carrying heavy radios through mud, coral, and smoke. Their transmissions link artillery to infantry, ships to shore, command to chaos. Each man memorizes hundreds of words, for every letter, every weapon, every military term. Turtle means tank. Iron fish means submarine. Buzzard stands for bomber. The entire code, built on their language, is alive, flexible, fast, impossible to predict. Reports from field commanders begin to sound almost reverent. Colonel Howard Connor of the 5th Marine Division would later say, "Were it not for the Navajos, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima. For the Japanese, it's a ghost war. They hear the transmissions, they record them, but no pattern emerges. No one outside the Navajo circle, not even most American officers, truly understands the system. The brilliance lies in its simplicity. The code is spoken, living, human. By the end of 1943, the Navajo Code Talkers have proven that the human mind, trained, disciplined, and steeped in tradition, can outperform any machine of war. In the heart of battle, where steel fails and noise dominates, it's language that becomes the deadliest weapon. February 1944. Central Pacific. In a small intelligence bunker in Tokyo, Japanese cryptographers gather around stacks of intercepted Allied transmissions. Pages of strange phonetic symbols, copied from radio recordings, line the desk. For months they've been listening, hours upon hours of the same haunting cadence. Woolachi tiesidantlish deahai. The linguists, some of the best in Japan, are frustrated. They've cracked British naval codes, decrypted American field ciphers, even penetrated certain machine systems. But this language defies all known analysis. They bring in experts on indigenous dialects from universities, scholars of Asian and Polynesian roots, all to no avail. None can identify its origin. Some theorize it's a hybrid of several tongues. Others think it's an artificial code designed by linguists. Meanwhile, in the Pacific Theater, American commanders are exploiting the advantage. Navajo transmissions move faster than any cipher system. No need for encoding machines, no delays. A standard military message, which once took 30 minutes to encrypt and decrypt, now travels in under 20 seconds. The Japanese can hear the words, but to them it's just noise. One captured Japanese officer later told interrogators, "It sounded like birds arguing, fast, sharp, endless. We recorded it, analyzed it, even slowed it down. But it meant nothing." What they didn't realize was that every word had two meanings. Chicken hawk wasn't a bird, it was a dive bomber. Black sheep wasn't livestock, it was the 5th Marine Regiment. And beneath those layers, the system went deeper still. Letters spelled out with words that only the trained Navajo operators could instantly recognize and translate. Even when the Japanese captured American radios and intercepted transmissions in real time, they never came close to breaking the pattern. By late 1944, the U.S. military classified the Navajo Code as Unbreakable, the only code of World War II to receive that distinction. In war, secrecy is survival. And for the first time, it was not the product of machines or encryption devices. It was born from a living culture, spoken through generations, forged in the rhythm of sacred words. The language of a people once forbidden to speak their own tongue had become the one language that no enemy could ever understand. June 15, 1944. Saipan. The morning air trembles with artillery fire. The beaches are chaos. Marines crawling through smoke, tanks grinding over coral, the ocean burning with oil and bodies. Amid the noise, 2 Navajo Code Talkers crouch behind a shattered tank, their radio wrapped in canvas to protect it from sand and shrapnel. Private First Class Carl Gorman adjusts his headset, shouting over the explosions. Message incoming from command. Beside him, Corporal Samuel Begay listens intently, pencil poised above his notepad. The transmission comes through in bursts, sharp, rhythmic Navajo words, spoken with calm precision even as gunfire tears the air apart. Within seconds, Begay translates it into English and relays it to the Marine captain nearby. Enemy tanks, northeast ridge. Artillery coordinates confirmed. Fire mission approved. Less than 2 minutes later, American howitzers unleash a devastating barrage. The ridge disappears in smoke and dust. A war correspondent who witnessed the scene later wrote, "While others panicked under fire, these men spoke like they were reading a prayer. Every word they said brought death to the enemy, and life to our side." Across the Pacific, in places like Guam, Peleliu, and Iwo Jima, the pattern repeated. The Navajo Code Talkers became the invisible nerve system of the Marine Corps. They carried heavy radios across volcanic rock, through swamps and jungles, often without sleep or food. Many had no formal recognition, no medals, no names printed in the papers. but their voices directed airstrikes, troop movements, and reinforcements, sometimes turning certain defeat into victory. On Iwo Jima alone, 6 Navajo Code Talkers worked tirelessly for nearly 48 hours, sending and receiving over 800 messages, all without a single error. Major Howard Connor of the 5th Marine Division later said, "Were it not for the Navajos, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima. Under the roar of battle, their coded words flowed like a hidden current, invisible, powerful, unstoppable. While others fired weapons, they fired language, and the enemy never saw it coming." By 1944, the tide of the Pacific War had begun to shift. The U.S. Navy was reclaiming islands one by one: Tarawa, Saipan, Guam, Peleliu, and behind every successful operation, the Navajo Code Talkers worked in silence, weaving their secret language into victory. The Japanese still intercepted their transmissions daily, but no matter how many experts they brought in, no one could break the code. Not once. In the dense jungles of the Pacific, battles were brutal, chaotic, and often fought face to face. Communication was everything. A single mistake in coordinates could mean hundreds of lives lost. But when the Navajo spoke, their words cut through the fog of war like lightning, fast, clear, and utterly secure. "Enemy tanks, Southwest Ridge," one would say into the handset. In Navajo, it became a rhythmic, flowing sound that no outsider could decipher. Seconds later, U.S. artillery responded with deadly precision. Major Howard Connor, who oversaw the Navajo Code Talkers at Iwo Jima, later said, "Were it not for the Navajos, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima." That wasn't an exaggeration, it was the truth. During that battle, 6 Navajo Code Talkers worked around the clock, transmitting over 800 messages without a single error. Under relentless fire, their radios crackled with commands, updates, and coordinates, all encoded through their ancient tongue. When a radio operator next to them fell, they didn't stop. When the enemy advanced closer, they kept speaking. And when the flag finally rose over Mount Suribachi, some of the men who made that victory possible were still sitting in muddy trenches, their hands shaking but their voices steady. Their work didn't bring glory. Most of them never fired a shot. But in the unseen world of military communication, they were the sharpest weapon the U.S. had. The code remained unbroken for the entire war, a first in military history. Not even after the surrender of Japan did the truth fully come out. The government kept the program classified until 1968. For over 2 decades, these heroes couldn't tell anyone, not their families, not their friends, what they had done. They carried the weight of silence, even after giving their voices to victory. When the code was finally declassified, the story of the Navajo Code Talkers began to emerge, and with it, the realization of how much one small group had changed the course of history. Their voices, once forbidden, suppressed, nearly erased, had saved tens of thousands of lives. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The very language that America once tried to destroy became the weapon that helped it survive. When World War II ended, parades filled the streets of America. Flags waved, bands played, and heroes came home, at least, most of them did with honor and recognition. But for the Navajo Code Talkers, silence followed. Their mission was still classified. Their names were not mentioned in newspapers. Their medals, if any, were generic and secret. They were told, once again, to keep quiet. They returned home to the deserts of Arizona and New Mexico, where the same government that had once forbidden their language now forbade them to speak of how it had saved the war. There were no interviews, no glory, no official acknowledgement. Some went back to herding sheep, others worked in mines or on ranches. Many suffered from what we now call PTSD, sleepless nights, haunting memories, the echo of gunfire mixed with the whisper of radio static. Their communities didn't know the truth. To many families, their sons had simply gone to war and come home. The details were locked behind the walls of military secrecy. One veteran, Chester Nez, one of the original 29 Code Talkers, later said, We couldn't talk about it, not even to our wives. We were told the code might be needed again. So we stayed silent. For 24 years, the silence lasted. During that time, America's attitude toward Native peoples hardly changed. Boarding schools still punished Navajo children for speaking their mother tongue. The land remained poor and forgotten. The people who had helped win the greatest war in history returned to a nation that still didn't see them. But among themselves they carried quiet pride. In ceremonies and gatherings, when no outsiders were listening, they sometimes spoke of the code, how they invented it, how it worked, how it felt to hear the language of their ancestors protect thousands of lives. They knew what they had done. They knew what their language had proven. The silence finally began to crack in the late 1960s. In 1968, the U.S. government officially declassified the Navajo Code Talker program. For the first time, the world learned the truth, that an unbreakable code had existed, created not by cryptographers in Washington, but by young Navajo Marines who had been taught to feel ashamed of their words. Journalists began to write about them. Schools started to invite them to speak. The nation that had once punished them for being too different now called them heroes. But by then, many of the original 29 were gone. Those who lived to see recognition carried mixed emotions. Pride, yes, but also sorrow. Pride for what they had achieved. Sorrow for how long it had taken to be seen. The Navajo language, once whispered in secret, now echoed in documentaries, museums, and classrooms. Children learned that it wasn't just a language. It was a code that defeated one of the most powerful militaries in the world. And for the surviving code talkers, that was their quiet victory, not the medals or the ceremonies, but the sound of Navajo spoken freely, without fear, across the land their ancestors had walked for centuries. The Navajo Code remains, to this day, the only military code in modern history that was never broken. Not once. Not by Japanese intelligence, not by German cryptographers, not even after captured equipment and intercepted transmissions. Even with their best mathematicians and linguists, the Axis powers couldn't make sense of the sounds they heard over U.S. radio frequencies. To them, it was gibberish. Rapid, melodic, filled with strange intonations that didn't match any known language. They recorded hours of intercepted messages, analyzed them in Tokyo and Berlin, but the pattern was impenetrable. The secret wasn't in the encryption machines. There were none. It was in the living code, the men who spoke it. Each message passed through human memory, spoken aloud in a rhythm and tone only Navajo men could produce correctly. If even one syllable was mispronounced, the meaning changed entirely. That was the genius and the beauty of it. Military historians later compared the Navajo Code to the Enigma system of Germany. But while Enigma relied on complex mechanical rotors and daily changing ciphers, the Navajo system relied on the brain, a network of minds trained to translate at lightning speed without a single written note. It was faster, simpler, and far more secure. By the end of the war, the code talkers had sent more than 800,000 messages without a single error. Not one message was cracked. Not one transmission misinterpreted. When the declassified reports were finally made public, even modern cryptographers admitted, the code's brilliance was in its simplicity. It wasn't just a cipher. It was a living expression of identity, culture, and resilience. The Navajo language, once suppressed by the U.S. government, had become the most powerful weapon in the Pacific. In later years, linguists studied the structure of Navajo to understand why it worked so perfectly as a code. They found that its syntax, tonal variations, and deeply contextual meaning made it virtually impossible for non-native speakers to decode. Even today, AI algorithms and supercomputers have struggled to reconstruct its logic without the cultural understanding behind it. What the Japanese commanders once dismissed as strange noises was, in fact, the sound of an unbreakable defense, a symphony of survival played in the language of a people who had survived centuries of suppression. The Navajo Code Talkers didn't just help win a war. They preserved a language that history tried to erase. And in doing so, they reminded the world of something profound, that the greatest strength sometimes comes from the voices we tried to silence. After the war, the Navajo Code Talkers returned home quietly. Their mission had been classified, their heroism unknown to the public for decades. Many went back to ranches and reservations, working the land, raising families, and carrying the weight of a secret that had saved thousands of lives. It wasn't until 1968 that their contributions began to be officially recognized. The U.S. Marine Corps awarded them the Navy Unit Commendation, and individual code talkers received medals for their service. Even then, much of their work remained shrouded in secrecy, details restricted by military classification. In 2001, the true scale of their heroism became widely known. Congress passed legislation awarding the Congressional Gold Medal to the original 29 Code Talkers, while subsequent participants received the Silver Medal. Ceremonies honored their bravery, their intelligence, and the cultural significance of the Navajo language as a weapon of war. Historians emphasize that the Code Talkers' achievement was not just tactical, but symbolic. Their language, once suppressed by government boarding schools, became a lifeline for Allied forces. It demonstrated how indigenous knowledge, when respected and applied, could transform global events. Documentaries, books, and films now chronicle their story, from the initial training camps to the beaches of Iwo Jima, where rapid transmission of coded messages directly impacted battlefield outcomes. Scholars and military experts study the Code Talkers to understand how language, culture, and strategy intersect in wartime innovation. Their legacy extends beyond military history. The story of the Navajo Code Talkers inspires new generations to appreciate cultural heritage, resilience, and the unexpected ways that knowledge can shape history. Today, statues, memorials, and educational programs ensure that their voices are not forgotten. The Unbreakable Code lives on, a testament to courage, intelligence, and the enduring power of a people whose words could not be silenced.